start this morning with a motion to approve the minutes from the February 20th meeting, if you've read through them. Is there a motion? From Eric Smith.
I move.
Is there a second? From Gary White. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. This morning we have a presentation from Leo Henning, and it's not on federal lead standards. It's on federal funding that's coming to KDHE this year. So sorry about that, Leo.
Morning, Chairman Minix and committee members. And I do have a few notes on federal lead standards, so if we do want to talk about it, we can. But that wasn't the initial discussion that I had anticipated for today. You have it up. So again, my name's Leo Henning. I'm the Deputy Secretary and Director of Environment at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And I was just going to talk to you a little bit about the federal funding that has been used for our small town infrastructure and for our state revolving loan fund programs that go out for drinking water and wastewater systems. And hopefully you have the presentation in front of you, and because there's some charts there I think you may find interesting. Okay, first, about 2 years ago, roughly, we received $10 million of ARPA money, which was part of the American Rescue Plan dollars. And with that, we provided $10 million to hand out as grants to our small towns. And our definition of a small town was those towns less than 1,000 people. And these are the smaller towns that can afford to take out a state revolving loan fund program. They can't get a loan because they probably couldn't pay it back, and therefore we can't loan money to a city that can't pay their loan off. So we have a very good bond rating because we have excellent returns on our loans. But so these are really targeted for those very small communities to help them come back into compliance, because these are small towns with compliance issues that can't afford to come back into compliance. So that's what the target for this first $10 million was for. And so this first graph shows you out of the $10 million that there were 18 towns that received grants for drinking water and wastewater upgrades. And next one, this is just to give you a geographical representation of where those towns are. Here is a listing of those cities and how much they received. And again, these are small towns. Most of them are well less than 500. There was one there, Galva, that had received $1 million, and it had 870 people. But most of them, as you can see, are pretty small communities, with the smallest one being Susank, which, to be honest, I'd never heard of the town before, with 28 residents in it. So, but this gives you an idea of who received it and how much they received. And the next slide is the cities that submitted applications for that $10 million. We had $10 million and we received $85 million worth of requests from the small towns around the state. So House Bill 2302 did provide us with an additional $3.2 million for these communities that are on this list. We are in the process right now of identifying which of those cities will receive that $3.2 million that we received through House Bill 2302. As you can see, $3.2 million still doesn't probably address all the cities on this sheet, but you can see that the need or requests out there with the small communities is large. One thing that I would note that is working with the smaller communities on these grants is not as easy as dealing with the larger cities. We have to do a lot of hand-holding, and and technical advice with these small communities because they just don't have the wherewithal to deal with grants and applications and work plans and things like this. So it is taking a lot of time on our staff to help these communities get through the process, but it will be good at the end because we will have these communities back in compliance, and therefore we're not having to take administrative actions against these small communities, something that we don't want to do. So that is the update on the ARPA dollars, the first 10 million that we received. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the state revolving loan fund. The difference again, the first is grants, not repayable. The second, these are loans that go out through us to these small communities. And what we're going to talk about is the bipartisan infrastructure law dollars that come to us through the Environmental Protection Agency, and then we loan those out to our communities. The summary sheet shows that we have since April of 22 to December of 23 put out 89 projects to our communities, totaling $334 million, and of which 67 million would be forgiven. They don't have to repay it back to us. So that little bit of incentive has spurred a lot of these cities to move forward with upgrading their facilities because they can see some of their loans forgiven. And the part that I would like to point out is that it also shows that our cities are willing to invest in their infrastructures. These are loans, they're going to have to pay them back. But they are willing to do it with a little bit of incentive to do the upgrades because they understand they need to. They know they have old infrastructure that needs to be replaced. So with that, I will go to the next slide. Here are the cities that have received loans from us, the 89. So you can see it's all over the state, more in central and eastern than western, but it is across the state. And what we have on the next slides is really more for your information. We have broken up the state into quadrants, and we have the northwest quadrant, and if you're a representative from that area, you can see the cities in that quadrant that received a loan. You can see the amount of the loan, how much of the loan was forgiven, and then what the project type was. So if you have some time and you want to look through it and look at your quadrant and see which cities in your areas have received the funding and how much was forgiven, this is a good reference for you to look at and know about. So with that, Chairman Minix, that is my summary of the BIL money, the federal dollars that come down. If you want, I can explain how the federal dollars come down more, but if you're not interested in that, I won't bore you with all the nitty-gritty details.
Just for clarification, these are one-time monies, is that correct?
The BIL is a 5-year program. We're in year 3, going on to 4. So the monies will be ending here in the next year from the bipartisan infrastructure law dollars.
Representative Pickard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thanks for the presentation, Leo. So I was noticing on the Northwest Kansas information here on Smith Center, they received $3.8 million and their forgiveness is $3 million. That's a really high percentage. How is that determined?
Okay, so I will try to explain this to you. It is complicated. The way we receive the money from EPA, it comes to us in buckets. And some of those loans are 100% forgiven. So if it is a project that is dealing with emerging contaminants, which are contaminants in the water that aren't regulated, which I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but a lot of the cities have a manganese problem in their drinking water. And this money was used for those cities to help remove the manganese out of their drinking water. So that is, if they had a project that was removing manganese, then the loan was 100% forgiven. Same with on the wastewater side. If they had a wastewater discharge, they can also receive 100% forgiveness for those type of non-regulated discharged chemicals. For regular loans or for the lead pipe replacement, because of the lead copper rule, those are a 50% forgivable. So that's how it comes to us, and then we use different additional criteria to divvy out the money based on things like poverty rates of the community, income rates, size of the community. Those are some of the other factors that we use to decide how much we can forgive on each loan. So it's a little complicated, and if you have questions, I'll try to answer them. I do have Tom Stiles behind me, who is very much more in-depth at getting into the exact forgiveness rates and things, but generally, we receive a request, an application, or a project. We look at it, we say, okay, we can allow, it's in this bucket, so we can give this much forgiveness, and then if your community falls in these different categories, here's the other factors that we use to come up with that forgiveness amount. We do put a maximum of $1 million forgiveness on some of these. So you'll see that like in Wichita, they had like a huge loan, but they only got $1 million of forgiveness. And that's because we do put a cap on forgiveness on some of those.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Leo, and the previous representative stole my question, but a little bit of a follow-up on that. And I appreciate all the detailed analysis here. Looks like just doing some rough math on that 10 million, you're looking at about 21% loan forgiveness across the board as an average, out of 253 million and you have 53.6 forgiven. I guess the question I like to ask, do the communities, they apply for the loan, and will they know, are they given the information of loan forgiveness before they make a decision on it as to what bucket they happen to go into?
Yes, they know exactly what the loan that they're asking for, how much would be forgiven, what the loan amount will be, and then they can make the decision whether they want to go forward or not.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Leo.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to switch gears here entirely and talk about the WISE program with Weston McCrary, and he's going to be online on WebEx. Joe, are you out there? Can you hear us? I believe Representative Seiwert's on WebEx also watching. Weston?
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Barely. We need to turn the sound up a little bit. Try that.
All right. Good morning, Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. And let me make sure that I have my slides sharing here. Can you all see my slide presentation?
Yes, we can, Weston.
What does it look like on your end? Give me just one moment.
Looks very
There we
good.
go. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chairman, committee. I'm Wes McCary. I'm the Tech Projects Coordinator for the Kansas Water Office. I appreciate you inviting me here today to present just an overview, although it may feel like a little bit of a drinking from the fire hose, and I apologize. I'll try to keep it simple, but I'm enthusiastic about what I do. But I'm going to share with you a little bit about what the WISE program is, some of the history on how we developed it, and what kind of the long-term vision is for the program. So now that we have all of our technical things in effect here, I'm going to go ahead and jump on. And I see a little latency there. There we go. So the WISE program, we officially launched it in 2022. It's the Water Innovation Systems and Education Initiative. It pulls funding from a couple of different sources within the Water Office and within our budget, and I'll get into a little bit of that later. I'm going to give you about 30-minute overview of the program. There are a lot of pictures in your slide deck, you'll notice, that do not have text, and I'll explain why here in a moment. It's kind of one of my ways and means of teaching from my ag instructor days, my college instructor days. The program is an expansion of the Legacy Water Technology Farms program that was and the PACE farms that were started by the Kansas Water Office in 2016. And we've taken a lot of the lessons learned from that initiative and from those experiences, and we've distilled them down into a new program. It's a public-private partnership program that focuses on fostering the implementation of practices, field practices, equipment, technologies, and management strategies. It's geared towards not just agricultural, that is irrigation, dairy, and feed yards, but it's also geared towards light industrial and rural municipal water applications where they dovetail in with other projects and programs going on in the state. The goal is simple. It's to result in measurable and scalable groundwater conservation, improving the water quality, promoting overall ecological and public health, and using economically viable solutions. A lot of times we find many of our programs that are out there, sometimes they're one-off and they're not necessarily scalable. So that's one of the things that we really focus on. And I'll get into details on each of those in a moment. And feel free to pause and interject questions as we go along here. So obviously, it's not any surprise to anybody in this chamber or any of the agencies that are represented here today. We're trying to look at the groundwater depletion, particularly in agricultural, in industrial, and municipal impacts. We're looking at watershed, water quality. We're looking at reservoir sedimentation. Again, not a main focus of the program, but a lot of the practices and discoveries we're making out of our pilot projects address some of the nutrient migration and sedimentation above our reservoirs and other storage facilities. We're also focused on municipal water quality, not like KDHE is, but from the agricultural practices side of it, because we are trying to implement all plans, all projects, all solutions, all at once, just like a producer would. So we're trying to, as we work on our pilot projects, we're trying to dovetail in with the set of practices and programs that any producer in the state of Kansas would be encountering, even when they're working in tandem with other agencies, both federal and state. And then finally, municipal water quantity issues, a lot of which we're seeing mostly out west. So some of the projects we have are agricultural irrigation technology and field practices. We've learned from almost the 8 years that we've been doing this from a state level that it's not just a matter of trying to teach producers about irrigation and the field practices, but it also gets into a complete holistic toolbox of management skills, technologies, field practices, and most importantly, we're learning education and attitude are a big part of that dynamic as we look for scaled solutions across the state. I have listed here dairy and feed yard water reclamation. I noticed that Frank Mercurio is online today, and he also testified, I think, back on the 20th or so, talking about some of the progress that they've made out there at Syracuse Dairy. Frank, don't mean to put you on the spot. I just saw you there, bud. But they are that's a good example of a project that we've helped fund and tried to be as much of a silent partner as possible while they worked out a lot of their own solutions. And we're finding that through our pilot programs, not only the Legacy Water Tech Farm program, but through the WISE initiative, we're finding that there's a lot of innovation going on and there's a lot of technical know-how out there in industry if we give that, if we're willing to support that. And then we're finding that the surrounding communities are responding to that message and that word is getting out. And we think that's a good leadership model. Also, I have industrial and municipal water reclamation. We'll talk about that. It's no surprise you guys know about Garden City and their reclamation project they have going down there, and other ones that we have discussions that are coming on board. Agricultural water quality, field practices, overall soil health and ecological conservation. So there's definitely a place for the greener practices, cover crops, some regenerative and soil health practices in conjunction with traditional agriculture. And then, of course, producer and public education initiatives. And I'll explain where we're going with that here in just a moment. Again, I'm just confirming, can everybody hear me?
We can, Weston. You're just a little bit loud. Maybe you tone it down just slightly.
Lo siento. My apologies, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you.
I'll back up from my my laptop a little bit here. The other thing we're looking at here is it includes the implementation of producer-led research and implementation. How the WISE program stands apart from any of our replicated research that's going on in the state is that the program is designed first and foremost to be a pilot program that is led by and initiated by producers and ag leaders to find solutions for themselves on a locally controlled local basis, and then share that, help the producers and the operators share that story and success story with the surrounding industry and surrounding community. A big part of that is we help promote the education and outreach events, again, for producers and said agricultural and industrial projects to showcase themselves throughout the year. And that one of the things that we're kicking off this year are some of our first go rounds of producer training events. We are working in the Rattlesnake Basin out in GMD 5 with several of the producers being led by one of our producers out there, giving him and our technical liaison an opportunity to mentor producers on their own terms. They're on speed dial, and instead of it coming from kind of a top-down state initiative. And we're going to be meeting once a month, talking about the lessons learned, the practices, getting some of these producers up to speed with not only soil and water health concepts, but also getting into irrigation and water reclamation concepts. And we will be reporting on that at a later time. The other thing you see here is interagency collaboration and cross-training, regional agricultural and public roundtable meetings. And then we see ourselves as a source of advice for other cost share programs in the state, particularly the Division of Conservation released their innovation irrigation cost share program now a couple of times in the last year and a half. We stand ourselves up as being a testing ground for many of those things to see what will go and what won't go, so we can effectively spend those state funds, no pun intended, wisely. Mr. Chairman, am I still too loud?
I think you're coming in loud and clear. You might be just a little loud.
Well, I'm going to do my best to maybe I'm going to have to start whispering on my end. Hopefully you can control some volume on your side. But I'll push this. I'll get myself away from the microphone as much as possible. I apologize.
You're fading out a little too much. There's a a middle ground here somewhere.
Okay, I'm doing my best. You guys just wave at me. Okay, and you can see our overview here. These are a lot of the key takeaways I'm not going to hit on because I want to kind of get through the picture slide deck that I have here. I do want everybody to know that we did put a little bit of time into the philosophical as well as the graphic presentation of the program. It's not random. We have three main, very simple takeaways. Number one, our first philosophy is using multiple, even uncommon systems, working together towards one common goal. So I know there's a lot of different people in agriculture that have different takes on things. It's either or, green practices versus technology, and sometimes there's camps on that. I happen to be a big advocate that technology can work together with soil health and field practices, as well as dovetailing in with policy and education. So it's a matter of making the WISE program is trying to work with producers and thought leaders and policymakers on how we bring all these tools together in what we're calling a toolbox. And at some point in the future, we'll probably give you a presentation of what the toolbox looks like from what we've learned in the last 8 years of doing these programs. We also see that there should be 3 cycles of progress for everyone. And you'll notice the 3 tiers on our WISE symbol there. Yes, you see the representation of the earth and the sun and the sky. The other thing is that all those coming together, it also kind of shows a focus point that all these things are working together to focus us onto the future. And so if we're all working together, we can do what step 3 says. There's no more kicking the can. It's a matter of getting things done right here, right now, just as the Water Committee and a lot of the initiatives in the last 2 years have been pushing us towards in the state of Kansas. And we're seeing a lot of promise and a lot of progress on a lot of fronts. So you're seeing a lot of your Leadership Kansas Leadership Center, and some of your Six Sigma management strategies coming into play. And these ideas, they're fun, they're graphical, but they're really made that have the public or policymakers or producers alike remember when they see the symbol, oh yeah, this means something. I'll also add here, when I'm talking about the three main points, we ask our producers when they come on board initially into the WISE program to spend a duration of no less than 3 years with us, so we can watch them progress in their learning, their knowledge, and in the results in their data. And sure enough, when we kind of go in and baseline things from the beginning, we're seeing year 1, year 2, and year 3. We're trying to measure quantitatively as well as intellectually the progress that we're making. Before I get into the pictures, any questions?
I guess I have a simple question, Wes. We're talking about best management practices, and every once in a while we have companies that come to this committee or some of our individuals and say they have a product that will conserve water, you can grow more crop with less nitrogen, you can do all those types of things. Do those companies come to the WISE program and offer their products or services for free to be evaluated side by side with others?
That has kind of been one of the original concepts behind the legacy water tech farms, as well as the WISE program. We have tons of industry partners that have come and gone, and many of them are still with us today. I have to be careful how I say this, but I get ambulance chased a lot when they realize that because of my previous roles working with technologies and promoting different things, and now being a person that manages funds to promote such things, yes, we have people that want their products placed. We also have, we are given and offered lucrative deals for the participants in our programs. They offer it to us not only on a state level, but they're trying to give, I guess I should use the term, wheel and deal to get their product placed just about every place. Some are free, some are heavily discounted. For example, we have an agreement with Series Imagery right now for a lot of our WISE programs, they're going to be flying fixed wing manned aircraft for remote sensing over many of our fields this summer. And we have done that in the past. They've offered us substantial discounts. So to answer your question, yes, we are given free and sometimes heavily discounted tech and or other things through the program.
Thank you, Wes. Representative Pickert.
Thank you, Wes, for your presentation. So can you tell me where all the funding comes from? I mean, is it just from the state of Kansas, and how much is it for the
Sure.
Y?
Sure. Our appropriation for fiscal year 24 was $850,000. It comes out of the High Plains Aquifer line item of our budget. We share that with some other projects, so it's not a fixed amount. A lot of the funds that also come out of that are what are being utilized right now for our Kansas Water Plan Partnership Initiative grants that have gone out and are currently being processed. So these pilots are coming out of a shared mix of some of the same funds that are now going out and becoming available to producers.
Thank you.
Any
You're
further
welcome.
questions? Seeing no further questions, go ahead, Wes, with your pictorial.
Sure. So the reason why I don't have any text in here, I'm just letting you guys know it's by full intention. I learned from my 15 years of teaching agriculture in college. A lot of people sometimes have a hard time reading while they're listening. So I'm just went ahead with a psychological way of teaching here of just, here are the pictures. I'm going to point and I'm going to talk just like we would in the field with producers. So the WISE program, its roots initially started in innovative irrigation practices. That is the spacing, the height, the distribution of water over different terrains, crops, and in different types of soil types in Kansas. And we found that there's not a one-stop shop. There's not one solution for every field, although industry would want you to sure think so, that if it works for the goose, it'll work for the gander everywhere else, and that's not what we find. When we find that when a producer actively engages management, they will save water on multiple fronts. The first and foremost is one of the things that we're doing this year is we're making sure that all the pivots that we are working with are standardized, and we are doing system audits to make sure that their well capacity and their pressures are all 100% where they need to be before we begin to look at their nozzle packages and their water distribution. We've noticed over the last 8 years, it's very important to get the right pattern, the right water droplet size, and the right inertia onto the soil and infiltrating into the soil. If you have the wrong pattern, if it's too light, there's a lot of loss to evaporative evapotranspiration, as well as to the wind that we have, as well as a lot of the water is getting kept up on the plant and above the soil root zone. So we've made a lot of progress in the things that we have found along these lines, and we've retrofit numerous pivots, as well as informed many of the groundwater management district's cost shares. Also, we're starting to see a growth in subsurface irrigation in applications around the state where traditional pivot irrigation is not viable. Trying to bring some of our various corners or one-off parcels of land into more economical crop cycles. I have a couple of pictures here. We have 3 different subsurface irrigation projects that we're working with, mainly doing hybrid testing, finding out which hybrids specifically specifically perform under what kind of water stresses. And that's good for us to know. Sometimes it's very difficult to get that measurement down pat when we're working with pivot irrigation because there's so many other environmental factors. I'm just going to keep jumping through here because there's a lot of data dive in all of these slides if we wanted to. Of course, another thing we got told during the water tech farm era is they said we became the water probe, the soil moisture probe program, and there sure were hundreds of thousands of dollars that went out into various forms of water technology, water soil monitoring, as well as telemetry units. You can see here being able to monitor water use, your water meter, and the application of your irrigation remotely has greatly changed the game. And industry has been really pushing that in the state of Kansas. We've seen Canadian, Californian, and even Israeli companies come here to Kansas to showcase and perfect their technologies. And that's one of the other things we've been doing on our WISE, many of our WISE sites, is that we've been working with on the R&D side with a lot of these companies and getting wonderful results as the producers are learning and getting up to speed with tech. Again, you're seeing some of the technologies we've been working with. One of the Achilles heels as we've been developing things has been rural broadband. We've had different conversations with the Department of Commerce and broadband and several of our even our federal policymakers about increasing broadband, especially in Western Kansas, both dark fiber and as well as cellular, in order to continue to build this robustness in field technologies. The other thing you're seeing here, this is some of the readings that are coming off of our soil moisture probes. Taking the time to teach producers how to read what looks like an EKG graph and translate it into go, no go for irrigation has been one of the biggest learning curves that we have found that we didn't tackle well in the early days of the program. But now that we have our roundtable programs going on where producers get to sit down and dive into the weeds on their own terms without sometimes having all the other agency and other people in the room, it invites them to ask questions and get answers on what they're looking at, so they more fully embrace the technologies that are available to them, and they understand that these graphs are actually showing them something in the soil structure with their fertilizer, with where the moisture is in the root zone, and even showing them where the fertilizer is and potentially leaking through the soil profile. Again, more tech pictures, taking old technology, retrofitting it with new add-ons, bringing them into the digital era, of course, because of the advent of cellular technology and now even space-based assets like Starlink. More of our equipment is becoming more machine controlled in a true, what we call computer numeric controlled sense, CNC sense. Machine control, virtual machine control from your telephone has become the cat's meow in the program. And of course, we're just trying to promote these technologies where they apply. They dovetail in with other things though. You'll also notice that as we have been able to get into putting machine control out on soil sensors, we also have had machine control that's moved into the center pivot market. Some of you may or may not be familiar with some of the things I'm showing you here, but variable rate irrigation is very much a thing. And depending on what part of Kansas you're in or other parts of the Great Basin or the Corn Belt, depending on the topography, you may have some high points and some low points. You may want to speed up or slow down your pivot based upon the nutrient and moisture holding capacity of the field. So when a lot of people start seeing these slide decks or they get out in the field and they realize what's really going on, that we're able to match the speed and the application rates to the topography and the actual soil's ability to hold moisture, there's water savings here in the places where they work. This technology is not conducive to have benefits in all applications, but in topography, we are finding if your water is running to the low side, you don't need to rewater it as much because it's going to go from your high side to your low side. So this is all part of a bigger movement that's been happening in agriculture. Some of you may or may not be aware of. It's called precision agriculture, where we are using soil-based metrics to drive the seeding rates, the planting rates, and the irrigation rates of our crops, particularly our commodity crops. So everything comes down to soil. If we can go out and properly map soil, make it into a geographic information system, GIS map, those maps can be uploaded into our tractors that are GPS driven. Again, I'm presuming that most of you in the chamber know something about this, but we definitely advocate for and promote soil driven technologies, because where we do not have leftover nutrient, fertilizer, pesticide, herbicide, or overly rated seed rates, we also don't over apply our our nutrients, which then become the carryover and prone for leaching and some of the other problems we have from east to west in Kansas. Again, another deep dive, more conducive to the classroom and or the field tech space. So these look like pretty colors. There's a lot of graphs and colors that seem like that are out there. And for some people that are used to seeing more greener practices, cover crops, regenerative, more holistic ways of doing farming, what we're actually looking at is the measurement of said soil conditions and cropping conditions, but we're looking at it through electromagnetic frequency, we're looking at it through remote sensing, we're looking at it through infrared, we're looking at it through the lens of different optics. What you see on the bottom left-hand corner is a field that was, we used a Veris machine, which is an electroconductive Coulter machine you put on the back of a tractor. And much like a multimeter, it can read the soil conductivity. And from that, we can measure some indice of its fertility. And sure enough, as we got into mid-season, that picture in the middle is an image from one of our satellites, one of our CubeSat satellites showing where the crop stresses are. Sure enough, the crop stresses are right where the soils were depleted. And then the final image that you see on the right side came off of the harvester's yield map, where we saw the bad soil, we had bad vegetative growth, and then it resulted in the poor performance of the crop. The problem when you see a field like this is that all of that uniformly got the same amount of fertilizer, same amount of water, and they got the same amount of seed. So from an economic vantage point, we want to help producers not throw that money away. We also don't want them to be putting down the surplus chemical and nutrients that are not going to viably go into the plant. If they don't make it into a viable plant, into the biomass of a crop, that means they're stored in the soil, and that becomes a potential water quality issue down the road. So I'm just trying to bridge the gaps between some of the things that many of you might be privy to or have heard about or read about. Again, you're seeing some of the electromagnetic technology in use. Once we come back and we can see where the different bands of soil tilth are, that gives us an area to go out and then soil sample and find out what the unique soil properties are in those areas. Again, here's a Veris machine on the back of a tractor that came from one of our, I think that came from CropQuest, which is one of our leading agronomic consultants in the state. And of course, the advent of using geospatial technology, GPS, not only for the guidance systems on tractors, but for the position of our center pivots in the field. We have come a long way in 20 years blending technology in with our agricultural practices, whether people are or not aware of that. Sometimes it stumps people for them to see how high-tech and redneck we actually are out here in different parts, particularly in broadacre ag out in western Kansas. What you're seeing here is a time and place. We do use aircraft, we do use satellites, we even use drones on smaller parcels to go out and detect crop stress, the viable biomass and the integrity of the growth of the plant. In the upper central part of that, I'm just showing you how we can use RGB, red, green, blue light, how it responds off the spongy mesophyll of a plant. I know, deep dive. But when you fly a crop like you see in the middle here under other optics, not only can you see the actual crop that's supposed to be growing, we can differentiate between the invasive crops that are out in the field. That allows people with the right technology to go out and only spray where the crops are instead of blanket spraying our crops. And I want to push something here. We are now in a new era of what we call, see and spray technology, where we are only spraying the crops or the weeds that are prevalent in the field, and we are minimizing our spraying and our concentration of herbicides in a lot of applications because of these newer technologies. Again, trying to remove the pancake of chemicals, nitrate, phos, all the things from east to west in Kansas that are getting into our watersheds or perhaps getting into our municipal water supplies. I have the symbol in the middle there. I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but this again is just showing that everything is soil driven when we get into production agriculture. And of course, now we're at a point where weather has always been something that's tracked by producers. Having localized weather systems instead of using the macro systems, we also have the field side weather stations that are giving us real ET, allowing producers to actually put down the rates of water that they need to their field on that day that are conducive to the evapotranspiration for whatever day that may be going, may be happening. The other thing is, I might add here, AI has had its prevalence in production agriculture, maybe more than other people realize. Many of our companies like Valley and Lindsay have been using the Watson AI for quite a while, almost 8 or 9 years, for predictive modeling on some of their centipivots. It can go and check the weather 4 or 5 days out. It can see what the trends are, as well as read the soil moisture on from the field, and it can make a decision to go or no go, much like programming your thermostat in your house to make that decision. So when we're looking at managing crops, sometimes we don't think about model-based or AI or machine intelligence, I should say. It's really machine intelligence, where it's doing the learning of the environment around itself, and it slowly but surely can get very, very, very good. It's like having a hired hand without paying a hired hand to go out there and manage your crops. Again, we're in the early stages of seeing these technologies demonstrated. I had to put this picture in there of saying, what's our target? None of you are unfamiliar with the pictures from the KGS, just showing what we're trying to strategically hedge against. Some of what you see here, I put some, these are, again, license-free imagery, most of it, because some of them I took and they came out of research that I was doing over the last 8 years in my former positions of things. You're seeing some of the technology here that enables the variable rate planting of seeds, going out and planting seed rates, chemical rates, fertility rates, based upon the soil zones in the field. Again, those soil zones may be driven by where they went out and bladed the soil for flood irrigation 60, 70 years ago, leaving a drastically different soil zone. If you're familiar with the NRCS and their Surgo data, soil web survey, there's ways for us to get a more robust and detailed version of those. The tractors, and this is the part that a lot of people don't realize, and I want to emphasize this, our tractors and center pivots can read these digital layers and run them like machine control. And that's something that I think that the public needs to know more and more about. We have the ability to tailor the density of our seed populations, our fertility densities, as well as our irrigation rates with the technologies that are available today. And there are a lot of unsung heroes that are a lot of unsung, I should say, success stories that are happening out there because of this technology that's not normally thought of in the soil conservation and the water conservation space. Again, target specific fungicide, herbicide, and pesticide instead of blanket spraying on our fields and then having it running off into our watersheds. They play their part. You're seeing some of the early stages here of pictures of where the early stages of Green Seeker. That technology later became Blue River and is now known as See and Spray in the John Deere world, where it only sprays the crop or only sprays the weeds as it finds it. Again, that's only new in the last 2 or 3 years, even on John Deere products. But what you're seeing here is the Green Seeker stuff we've been doing on a couple of our WISE projects and legacy water tech farms. Again, another way to reduce that footprint and reduce the building of that nutrient pancake that's above some of our groundwater supplies. So some of you are going, all right, Wes, enough with the technology. Maybe we want to see something greener. Another thing that we're doing out there, if a producer is prone for doing it, then we are prone for doing it. It's not just technology, it's not just education, it's not just the space tech stuff, but it's also getting into crop rotation selections, crop hybrids, and learning that in some spots maybe it's not conducive for corn. Maybe we really do need to go to our Milo, or rather many people know as grain sorghum. My FSA people don't like me calling it Milo for some reason. They like it being called sorghum. So we're getting into also testing a lot of different hybrids, some of the flex technology, some of the drought guard technology. We've worked with some of the big major corn vendors that are out there. I don't want to start mentioning names here, but doing side-by-side trials on which things react better under different stress and water conditions and soil conditions. You'll also notice we're doing a lot of research with cover crops. What's the role of cover crops and what blends of cover crops can work? We've had producers say, well, cover crops just don't work out here in western Kansas, Wes, or in the Rattlesnake Basin. But it really comes down to, are you using the cool season, the warm season? Where are they? What kind of crops are they following? What are they going in front of? And what are your blends? Are you just putting down rye? Are you using the vetches and the other legumes? We're seeing a lot of success in integrating these into alternative cropping systems and grazable forage systems, which are leading to where some of you I know will have questions on, is to, hey, can't we just solve a lot of these problems if we just promote better soil health and we really promote different types of grazing systems and forage systems for animals? Absolutely. And so you're starting to see here some of these pictures where we're having forage grasses and cover grasses in between our corn stalks. The other thing it does is it opens up new markets and economic viability for our producers to do this without only the incentives that are coming from state and federal government. And of course, I'm going to get on a little more of the holistic side of things here. Because there are markets out there where cattle are sought out for being grass-fed or naturally fed in some of these I guess the proper term is regenerative ag practices. We could still use center pivot technology, especially in our low capacity wells, to go out and find, we could do supplemental irrigation on forage and on hay and some of these other grazable vegetations. And of course, I'm showing you a picture here. One of these pictures is taken off of a field in eastern Kansas. I got to be careful what I point out here, but the practices in eastern Kansas are a little bit different than western Kansas. We do see the no-till practices, and some of them happen a little bit more in the western part of the state than the eastern part of the state. And we also see a lot of these rills and a lot of this erosion going into our watersheds. And there are other agencies present that have great programs that are going on to help address some of these reductions in nutrient loads as well as in sediment loads that are going on above and below our reservoirs in our municipal water supplies. But again, a lot of this is coming out of our agricultural practices, and we stood up WISE not just to be geared towards irrigation, but also towards field practices, or to dovetail in with field practices that promote higher or better water quality. And almost done with this side of the picture deck here, and then I'll let you guys have at it with your Q&A. Anytime we can promote, and I want to be on record saying this, anytime we can promote better soil tilth, better soil health, good soil microbiome does in fact measurably result in human gut microbiome and animal gut microbiome, and that is all driven to good food health. Sometimes we disconnect all of our water issues, water quantity and water quality, from the greater food systems that are out there. And it could be argued in some circles, if you're looking at the right data, that our food systems are in crisis, and a lot of it is coming back to the way we are doing agriculture. I get questioned about this all the time. Wes, what are you doing to address getting chemicals out of our breakfast cereal? And they are indeed there. And again, this is not necessarily what the Water Office does, but we do have to be privy to it as we're promoting means and methods and education. We're trying to find those alternative markets that are going to promote long-term adoption of better practices for producers, because if it's not economically viable, we can't expect our producers to go after conservation for the sake of just conservation. The other thing I'll put on here, and then we're kind of getting to the tail end here, and you guys tell me if I'm still on track. One of the things that has started coming out of our lessons learned in Southwest Kansas in particular is that we have a lot of hard filtration solutions that are coming out kind of for the first time that can treat lagoon water and dairy and feedlot wastewater. In the past, we would use that water and sometimes pump it out and dilute it with groundwater and try to irrigate with it. Of course, as salts and other nutrients have compounded and grown denser, it's harder to reuse that water for just irrigation. We're finding that with certain filtration systems, particularly some of the Canadian and the Israeli companies that we're working with, this water can be greatly cleaned up and reused, even for flushings, or we can use more of that reclaimed water for irrigation than we previously would be able to. So again, hard solutions mixed with soft solutions. And we drove these lessons learned out of our pilot programs in the WISE program and drove that into our current Kansas Water Plan Partnership Initiative, or as we call QIPI funds. And we've set aside funds just for feed yards and dairies because of the findings of these pilot programs. Again, I want to state, we believe our lane as the WISE program is not replicated science. We are not out here trying to compete with any of the other BMP projects for any of the other agencies, sister agencies that are out there. We are simply trying to create a classroom and a place for producers and feed yards and industrial users to find solutions for themselves, advocate for themselves, and then promote those findings both to policymakers and their communities and their bankers. And we even have discussions going on with insurance because we realize we didn't get here overnight and we're not going to get out of it overnight, but we have some answers, and I'm excited when I share things like this. Again, education, some of the pictures here, if you look closely, you'll see some people that you may know. We have WISE tours, field days, demonstrations. Of course, I'm a fan of higher education, getting out in front of young people, working with producers, advocating for workforce. One of the things that we're struggling with is finding a workforce in water-related or soil conservation-related practices. We're slowly but surely finding fewer and fewer people that are cognizant on how the technologies work and how they integrate in with production agriculture, as well as, sustainable and organic and regenerative agriculture as well. And again, what you see up there on the right-hand side, that was one of the things we were doing with some of the NRCS staff out in Northwest Kansas. We're using some of those lessons learned to stand up training days for even our agency people. We have a lot of young staffers that are coming into new agencies that may or may not be aware of how the mechanics of things work, how soil mechanics work, how basic plant and soil science work, and how the technologies, how we can use aerial imagery or variable rate technology or cover crops or alternative forages to address some of these water issues. And again, the other thing I want to promote here, and as you see the water office's website get modified here, we're behind the scenes, some of our staff have been doing a really good job. I think you're going to be excited to see what we're coming up with our new website. You're going to see a map with all of the alumni of our water technology farms, as well as our WISE programs and some of our grants. You're going to see kind of where the different monies have gone and different success stories have gone out there. And we're just excited to talk about, sometimes we get tired of talking about all the problems, but we also want to share all the success stories with all of our stakeholders, both public and private. And you'll see up here, not only trying to do implementation and research from a producer's vantage point, but we're also trying to do what we're exactly doing today, advising policy. With that long-windedness, and thank you for listening to me, and hopefully it wasn't too loud. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Questions? Representative Blacks.
Thank you for your program, very informative. Do you have any idea of some of the results? You're putting on a lot of educational program, a lot of stakeholders involved. Do you have any data on success, or is that too early yet?
It really is too early. I could give you off the cuff data, but we're collecting both field data as well as if you're looking at gallons and acres and things, trying to get a metrics on, like, for the dollar spent, how much water did we save? We have an idea on some of this stuff, but we're still compiling it. Right now, we're just really trying to build a program. We spend a lot of time trying to fund this program as well as other programs, and just we're taking our time to make sure we don't duplicate the lessons learned from the previous programs we've implemented in the last 8 years. So yes, we're still compiling.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, Wes. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm always really amazed by all the technology and all the ways that you collect data to make these kinds of decisions in the field. Just a couple of questions. So I'm kind of wondering, you talk about some of the roundtables and working with producers. If a producer were to reach out to you and say, I would like to start implementing some, soil health, water conservation, precision ag technologies, is that something you can help with? Is the Water Office able to work with producers directly to help them implement those things? Would be one question. And then, we talk about all these technologies. What are some of the entry level, if you will, technologies that you think are important for, as many people as possible to implement? And then, I know the availability of technology kind of goes up from there, but what are some of the things that you think are important for a lot of producers to have that are relatively easy to implement kind of at the entry level? Thank you.
Those are great questions, Representative Vaughn. Let me see if I can address the first one. We are not a cost share program. We are not here for open enrollment for producers to just reach out and we can start working with them. We have to be strategic in who we choose to work with. And so whether we're working inside of a GMD or we're working with an educational institution, we're working with strategically placed and positioned partners, particular people who are really trying to move the ball, because we just are not a cost share program. We're advising our cost share programs. We advise our groundwater management districts. We advise our sister agencies with things that we might recommend, which leads to the answer to your second question. What are the kind of the gateway technologies and/or practices? We have a toolbox in development, and we're rolling this out right now in the Rattlesnake Basin in Groundwater Management District 5 with a producer-led consortium of other 5 producers. And that toolbox starts off, number one, every center pivot in the state of Kansas needs an audit. And some of you guys are familiar with my, I like always using analogies in word speech, but sometimes they're the best way to convey something. But what we've done with a lot of our cost shares, in my opinion, in the past, is that we've thrown a lot of money towards something that people don't understand what they're looking at or how to use it. And then when the cost share monies go away, so does the conservation. Things get shelved. We've put a lot of lipstick on pigs, so to speak. And what I'm saying is we've gone out there and we've retrofit a lot of nozzle packages and put in soil moisture probes and even flown acres with remote sensing, not even knowing what the system integrity or the baseline integrity of the well, the pressures, the nozzles. They may not even have the right nozzle package. So we've learned that we're going back, and as we enroll new programs, the first thing that has to be done is we have to do a system audit. We've got to do a pivot audit, knowing what the actual well capacity is, knowing what the actual energy audit is. So is it being efficient with the energy source that it's using? And then what are the pressures? What are the front pressures, the end pressures? And that'll drive what kind of nozzle packages are available. What can the soil below that pivot actually hold? Sometimes it's not a matter of how much water you can put down. It's how much water you can retain for the amount of water you put down for that infiltration rate. So system audits leading to the right nozzle packages. So again, low-hanging fruit, very scalable as far as solutions. And then getting some kind of soil moisture probe into the soil profile. And they're getting better and better and they're easier to read, but being able to look at your soil moisture probe at the end of July when your neighbors are all turning on their pivots and it looks dry and crusty on the top, but being able to look at your profile going, okay, my root zone is 12 inches deep and I have water down there, learning to kind of close your eyes to what you're seeing on the surface on a parched day in a corn crop and knowing that you actually have moisture down there. That is what we've got to get producers, particularly in central and western Kansas on the High Plains Aquifer, comfortable looking at. Not irrigating because it's hot, not irrigating because that's what dad or mom or whoever did, not irrigating because the neighbors are doing it, but literally looking at the sensors that are in the soil. And then the third thing that is pretty cost effective at this point is at least satellite imagery. We're at the point where there's so many different space assets that are flying for remote sensing purposes that we can get a glance on a crop and how it's performing with its water, its chlorophyll, with its performance pretty well. The fixed wing flights, they cost a little bit more, but they're pretty steady and available through different distributor networks in Kansas. And then in case-by-case scenarios, usually 40 or 50 acres or less, we can fly a drone to get a closer look at something. So again, system audit, nozzles, the soil moisture probes of some sort, and then going ahead and having imagery. If we can start with those 4 things where every producer from east to west knows how to utilize them as a part of a toolbox, everything from there on out, whether you're introducing different kinds of BMPs or forages or cover crops, once you know how to read your measurement tools, when you implement the other things, whether they be hard assets or green assets, you're going to be able to see quantitatively, the producer is going to be able to see quantitatively the impacts of introducing said cover crop. For example, we know that certain cover crops raid 2 to 3 inches if you implement them. We only know that because we put soil moisture probes out there to measure that. But we also found that as you build that soil tilth and its moisture holding capacity, and this is an argument amongst producers, those who use tech and those who just kind of use this and then they kind of, I know how this works. There's no place for cover crops in western Kansas. Meanwhile, the guy down the road saved 6 inches of water because of his implementation of cover crops by building moisture holding capacity in the profile. So it's a holistic approach, and I don't know if I answered your question well or not, but
Yeah, absolutely. I love the toolbox concept. I think that's a great way to make this something that's actionable by a lot of people across the state. So I'm excited to see how you guys roll that out in GMD5 and what all is a part of that. But it's interesting to hear you talk about kind of those gateway technologies and also the potential that still exists beyond that for things like the variable rate irrigation and the see and spray and a lot of those things that it's really exciting to hear that that's starting to come to Kansas. So thank you for that. I think I had one last question, if I could, Mr. Chair. I've brought it up in a couple of meetings, but I'm really excited about this opportunity through the NRCS RCPP grant that's coming to the state to potentially fund 2 positions at each GMD to help implement a lot of these technologies and help do a lot of this education with producers. And I'm excited about that. And, you know, but also I know you guys are doing a lot of this work and you're kind of leading the way on what this looks like in Kansas. So I'm just wondering, is that an opportunity where you guys are going to be able to work together to help implement this program moving forward? Because I would love to see a lot of the things that you've learned, a lot of the research that you've done, a lot of the work that you've done and laid the groundwork for that to influence the RCPP program and how that's implemented moving forward.
sure. I think most of you who know me well, you know that I come out of after my engineering career, I got into ag education for 15 years. That's a story in and of itself. But I've been working in Kansas on workforce development because not only do I believe that our solutions are in people, not necessarily tech or not necessarily just green practices, but we have to have people who know how to implement the right tools at the right time. And that's also the economic driver for the state of Kansas, right? It's people, good people. So one of the lessons learned that came out of the legacy water technology farms era was that we have a need for education, and it's not just a need for education inside of with producers, but we needed education that was out there in the workforce. Representative Minix, Mr. Chair, you brought up before that we are having a hard time maybe sometimes finding people that can work in certain industries, or you had brought up kind of, are we working with some of the other industry people out there, and And I said, I got ambulance chased by a lot of these guys. A lot of the times when industry partners are calling me, they're not even calling me about where the dollars are. They're calling me going, Wes, do you know a guy? Can you find me a kid to come out and work on the pivots? Can you find me a kid who understands how to load a prescription map, that's just a GIS map, into a tractor, and then load that same one into the pivot? Because we need to water the same pattern in the field that we planted with the tractor. I need somebody. If you look at a lot of our leaders in irrigation, particularly in Western Kansas right now, they're my age, and maybe I shouldn't admit how old I am, but I'm definitely half cooked at this point. I'm knocking on my 50th birthday. Our industry is very much my age and older in the world of irrigation. Not even to bring up, the average age of a crop duster pilot is older than a retirement age of an FAA pilot in their 60s. Not to mention all of our truck drivers and those with CDLs out there are arguably in their 60s who are hauling corn out of Nebraska or around Kansas. So there's a whole other thing to be addressed beyond the water committee here when it gets to workforce. We took our lessons learned, realizing that we needed interns and we needed pipelines into workforce. And we took that into the RCPP grant. And we realized that we can't just go put technologies out there without technical assistance on some of the rocket science I was showing you earlier. We need people who can sit down from producer to producer and point out, hey, this is what this graph means. And nerdy things like translating the word, like here's your diurnal process as you see the corn plant drinking. The producer needs to be able to see that. You can even see in soil moisture probes, you can see at what depth your fertilizer is because of the salinity of a lot of fertilizers. It'll create a fidget in the line work, and you'll go, oh, wow, I actually have salts and fertilizers below my root zone. You can see that with the soil moisture probe, and that may teach you to use less water because you're driving it below your usable root zone, and therefore it becomes volatile, prone to things like leaching. If you don't have somebody there with a producer that can tell them that and answer those questions, we're just scaling cost share and putting money out there, which is also needs to be done. So that was some of the thought that went in behind the RCPP, saying, hey, we need to be able to afford people over the next 5 years that are going to be strategically placed and that are hopefully not only technologically aware, but they're scientifically aware, and they're used to living in the demographics where we're going to have them. So to answer your question, Representative Vaughn, in a nutshell, we are currently working with the DOC right now as we are fleshing out exactly what the negotiations are going to be with the NRCS. We have those meetings coming up, and we're in some very finite discussions, but we're not going to count any chickens before they hatch is exactly where the funding is going to go. Some of it's going into equipment, some of it can go into training. Only certain amounts of it can actually go into the personnel. But yes, that's the goal, is to stand up personnel for me in a lot of these sensitive areas, starting with the groundwater management districts.
Thank you so much, Wes. I'm really appreciative of all the work you do, and look forward to seeing where that program and the WISE program goes in the future. Thank you.
Wes, I'm going to throw another analogy at you. If the current ag technology people were to address potholes here in the city of Topeka, they would probably send a drone out about 3 a.m. with LiDAR hanging underneath to indicate where those, down a street where those holes are. They'd analyze the next day, and the second night during the late night hours when the traffic's lowest, they would send a machine down to drill a circular pothole out 5.5 inches deep, drop a 5.5 inch plug into that area and move to the next one and continue. If a 911 call comes in, those machines or robots would immediately move to the curb. That's kind of the point we're at in agriculture right now, folks. We're doing prescription planning, fertilizing, analyzing the crops with satellite, drones, everything else. There's a lot of technology out there, and we're struggling and fighting for the same type of technicians that we need in agriculture that the city of Topeka really needs on their pothole project, I think. Does that make sense, Wes?
It's a great analogy. I mean, the technology is out there to fly drones at night autonomously with LiDAR and they could go do a survey of this without impacting anybody other than if people have an Orwellian vantage point towards the drones flying through the public right of ways. But yeah, that technology's there, and we could probably implement something like that. I'll mention this. You guys may not know. I mean, our state is only one of 2 states that can fly drones under the FAA's Part 107 beyond the line of sight. That happened under Director Bob Brock over there at Division of Aviation some number of years ago, working with K-State Poly. That type of tech, that's low-hanging fruit if we want to do that. And so one of the reasons why you hear the promotion of technology and automated technologies, which seem to scare people in this era of Tesla and self-driving cars, is because flat out we don't have the people. It's one of the reasons why, and I'll mention this, it's kind of a side thing, but from lessons learned, I'm a Cold War kid, so I remember this. Toyota and Honda came into the United States and out-manufactured us, and the quality control maintained higher than Chrysler, Ford, or Chevy when they had workers, the labor workers on the lines, and they could produce a car faster, no workman comp, no labor strikes, because they programmed those welding robots in the early days to just sit there and do a widget all night long, and so they had fewer but highly paid and more highly trained technicians versus in the early days of domestic motors. We thought, all right, we need to put people in these ways. We've slowly found out from industrial processes, we do not need to be putting human beings in harm's way or in highly, risk averse, positions that's why we have machinery. That's why we have brains and we create things so that we can be the managers and keep our bodies out of the way. Some people argue that it takes jobs away. I would argue, especially in Kansas, it's not taking any jobs away. We have more jobs than we have people. So it comes back into water as well as the rest of production, agriculture, and we're going to see it in the dairy yards and the feed yards as well.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Wes, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Committee, on Thursday, we're going to have a hearing on Senate Bill 331, talking about lead content in pipes. And I hope to work that bill a week from today on Tuesday and get it passed out, if that's the committee's pleasure, onto the House. We've got a couple other presentations coming up. On the 19th, we'll hear from Kansas Geological Survey. Recently received a large federal grant to assist them in starting to model water quality here in the state of Kansas. It's very early in this process. We're basically going to receive a presentation on their grant application, but it has been approved. I will not be here that day. On the 18th and 19th in Liberal, Kansas, is the Ogallala Water Summit. I will try to attend that, and anybody else that wants to attend is welcome to. But on that Tuesday, the 19th, there will be that educational presentation. Anything else for the good of the committee? Seeing none, we're adjourned.